Hi everyone, in this lesson we're going to look at solving worded problems involving mixed units, things like lengths, volumes, and money. So because it's a problem solving lesson, the way that this works is you pause the video, give the problem a go, and then we'll run through it together. So go ahead and pause the video and then we'll look at the solution together. A machine produces 2.5 meters of fiber optic cable every quarter of an hour. Every 10 centimeters of cable is sold for a profit of 50 pence. The machine runs for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. How many weeks will it take for the business to make £100,000 in profit from a single machine? So lots going on in this question. Let's start by looking at the first sentence and seeing is there anything we can work out. So the machine produces 2.5 meters of fiber optic cable every quarter of an hour. Let's draw a small little table like this, and I'm going to be looking at length, that's the 2.5 meters, and also time. Both of those have been given to me. And I'm told that the length produced is 2.5 meters, and that is done in 1/4 of an hour. With problem solving questions, oftentimes we don't necessarily know where to go right away, but we can turn things into more helpful forms. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work out how much cable it produces every hour. I know 1/4 of an hour is 2.5 meters. So I'm going to multiply by 4 to work out what length is produced in 1 hour. And I'll use my calculator, so I'll do 2.5 multiplied by 4 to give me 10 meters. And 1/4 of an hour multiplied by 4 is 1 hour. So the machine produces 10 meters every hour. Let's look at the next sentence. Every 10 centimeters of cable is sold for a profit of 50 pence. So we'll leave this where it is for now. We might come back to it later. And we'll draw another little table like this, where we have length and profit. And it tells us that 10 centimeters of cable yields a profit of 50 pence. Again, it might be helpful to change this into a more useful form. Let's work out the length that gives a profit of £1. So 50 pence multiplied by 2 gives us £1. Multiply that length by 2, and that tells us that 20 centimeters of cable gives a profit of £1. The machine runs for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. How many weeks will it take for the business to make £100,000 in profit from a single machine? What we could do is we can work out the length needed to produce a profit of £100,000. So we know that £1 of profit is gained from 20 centimeters of length. We want to scale that up by 100,000. And this will tell us the length of cable needed to make £100,000 of profit. So I'll do 20 multiplied by 100,000, which gives me 2 million. Centimeters. In order to get that total profit of 100,000, I would need to make 2 million centimeters of fiber optic cable. In the previous part of the question, we were dealing in meters of fiber optic cable, and that's what we had over here in relation to time. So let's go ahead and turn that 2 million centimeters into meters. And to do that, we divide by 100 because there are 100 centimeters in a meter. And that would give me an answer of 20,000 meters. I know I would need to make 20,000 meters of fiber optic cable to get a profit of £100,000. What we then want to do is work out the time it would take to get 20,000 meters. Let's pop in our 20,000 meters. We know 10 meters is 1 hour. We need to work out how many hours it would take to make 20,000. And here we want to know, well, what would I multiply 10 by to get to 20,000? And a quick way to remind yourself of how you work out this multiplier is imagine you had 1 and 2. What would you multiply by to go from 1 to 2? Well, obviously you'd multiply by 2. But if you had to use these two numbers to work out that multiplier, you would take this number and divide it by this number. So that's the same in this case. We'll take our 20,000 and divide it by 10. Well, that gives us 2,000. That's how you work out those multipliers. That means we'd have to multiply our 1 hour by 2,000. That gives us an answer of 2,000 hours to make our 20,000 meters, which gives us our £100,000 profit. So this is the time it would take to make enough cable to get the profit. And we need to know how many weeks of the machine running would it take to get to 2,000 hours. Well, it says the machine runs for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. We can say that the time the machine runs every week is 10 hours multiplied by 5 days. So I'll say the time the machine runs per week is equal to the 10 hours it runs every day multiplied by the 5 days it runs for in a week. So that gives us a total running time of 50 hours. We'll say that 1 week equals 50 hours. And we want to know how many weeks it would take to get to 2,000. So we'll take our 2,000 hours, divide it by the time it runs for every week, which is 50 hours. So we'll type in 2,000. And then we'll divide that by 50. And that gives us an answer of 40. My answer to the question, how many weeks will it take for the business to make £100,000 in profit from a single machine, is it will take 40 weeks. Pause the video and give this next problem a go, and then we'll look at the solution. So Jeremiah makes 15 business trips to London in June. Traveling to London takes 76 minutes, and traveling back home takes 50% longer. If Jeremiah's company pays him £16.50 per hour to travel, what is the total financial cost to the business for the time he spends traveling that month? A good way to start this question is to work out how long each trip takes him. So we'll say that one trip is equal to the 76 minutes it takes him to travel into London. And then it says, and traveling back home takes 50% longer. So we want to add on 50% longer than 76 minutes. Let's work out how long it takes him to get home. So 50% longer, we need to work out a multiplier for that. Remember, we always start with 100%. And if we've added on 50% to the journey time, that means on the way back home, his journey time is 150% relative to his way there. That's his way there. That's his way home. And in order for this to be useful, let's turn it into a decimal multiplier. Divide that by 100 takes us to 1.5. So if I take my 76 minutes on the way there and I multiply it by 1.5, this increases it by 50%, and that will give me the time it takes him to travel home. So we'll go 76 multiplied by 1.5, and that gives us an answer of 114 minutes on the way home. So one trip is the time it takes him to get there, that's 76 minutes, add on 114 minutes on the way home. And go ahead and add those two together, 76 add 114, gives us 190 minutes for one trip. It says Jeremiah makes 15 business trips to London in June, so let's work out the time for 15 trips. So 15 trips is going to be 15 times 190 minutes. So do 15 multiplied by 190. And that gives us 2,850 minutes. So we've worked out the total time Jeremiah spends traveling in June. If Jeremiah's company pays him £16.50 per hour, notice the units here are in hours, so we're going to have to turn this into hours. What is the total financial cost to the business for the time he spends traveling that month? Let's go ahead and turn our 2,850 minutes into hours. We know there are 60 minutes in every hour, so if we divide 2,850 by 60, that turns it into hours. And that gives us 47.5 hours. His company pays him £16.50 per hour, so we want to do the 47.5 hours multiplied by 16.50, and that's going to be the total cost. So we'll say the total cost is equal to the cost for every 1 hour it costs the company, so that's 16.50, and then multiplied by how many hours he travels for, which is 47.5. So do your answer already stored as 47.5, multiply that by 16.5, and that gives you this answer, which is £783.75. And that's the final answer to that one. Here's your last worded problem. Pause the video and give this one a go. Okay, let's run through this one. Patrick's Pizzeria buys olive oil for the restaurant in bulk. The density of the olive oil is 0.92 grams per milliliter. The restaurant orders 0.184 tons of olive oil. That's a lot of olive oil. If the olive oil costs £6 per litre, what is the total cost of the order? Often with problem-solving questions, we want to take it line by line and see if we can work out anything useful. Patrick's Pizzeria buys olive oil for the restaurant in bulk. The density of the olive oil is 0.92 grams per milliliter. So let's set up a little table like this, where we have the mass in grams and the volume in milliliters. And it tells us that the density of the olive oil is 0.92 grams per milliliter. In other words, it's 0.92 grams for every 1 milliliter. The restaurant orders 0.184 tons of olive oil. So they've given us the mass that they've ordered, but they've given us it in tons, not in grams. What we want to do, we want to turn that 0.184 tons into grams. And what we need to know is that 1 ton is 1,000 kilograms. And if we imagine how we go from tons to kilograms, we would multiply by 1,000. We have 0.184 tons. And if we multiply that by 1,000, you might not need your calculator to do this, and that's okay. But it gives us 184 kilograms. That's how much olive oil they ordered. Now over here, we had the mass of olive oil in grams. They ordered 0.92 grams, and that was 1 milliliter. So we want to turn the 184 kilograms into grams. What we can say is 184 kilograms is equal to, well, there are 1,000 grams in a kilogram. We multiply that by 1,000 to give us this number here. So that should be grams. 184,000 grams. So we know that this is how much the restaurant ordered. So 184,000 grams. And what this allows us to do is to work out the unknown volume of how much olive oil they ordered. To do this, we want to see what did we multiply 0.92 by to get to 184,000. And like I said on the previous example, if we had 1 and 2, we can see that we've multiplied by 2. But how do we get that multiplier? We do this number divided by this number. I'll do my 184,000 divided by 0.92. So take your 184,000, divide it by 0.92, and it gives you an answer of 200,000. So that's what I multiply by. Therefore, that's what I'm going to multiply my 1 milliliter by. 1 multiplied by 200,000 is 200,000 milliliters. So we now know that's how much olive oil they ordered in terms of a volume. If the olive oil costs £6 per litre, what was the total cost of this order? So we've got the volume that they ordered in milliliters, but let's go ahead and turn this 200,000 milliliters into litres. And to do that, we divide by 1,000 because there are 1,000 milliliters in a litre, which gives us an answer of 200 litres. The olive oil costs £6 per litre, so we want to multiply 200 by 6. We'll say the total cost is equal to the 200 litres that they ordered multiplied by £6 per litre, like this. We'll do 200 multiplied by 6 to give us £1,200. And that should be the answer that you got. If you're following along using our lesson booklets, you can now complete exercise 1. Thank you for watching the video.